Steve Harvey has talked about thousands of Family Feud moments in interviews. He has only cried when talking about one of them. This is that one. The cameras were rolling when a 15-year-old girl in box braids she had done herself that morning looked Steve Harvey in the eyes and said 9 words that brought 300 people to absolute silence. "I'm playing for my mom's chemo, Mr. Steve." She said it the way a child recites a fact she has memorized, steady, practiced, as if she had rehearsed it in the bathroom mirror 100 times, so she wouldn't cry when the moment came. Aaliyah Thompson was standing at the Fast Money podium, 5'4", wearing a yellow blouse her mother had ironed with shaking hands at 5 a.m. in a 1-bedroom apartment in Jackson, Mississippi, and she had just scored 199 points. 1 point short of $20,000. Steve Harvey was mid-stride, walking toward her with the consolation card, when Aaliyah said those words. Steve stopped. His feet stopped. His hands stopped. The card hung at his side. He looked at this girl, at the braids, at the yellow blouse, at the hands pressed flat on the podium the way she'd seen contestants do on television, and his chin began to tremble. He said, "Your mama?" Aaliyah nodded. Steve Harvey pressed the card against his chest and turned away from the cameras, and his shoulders shook once, twice. And when he turned back around, the tears were already falling, and he said, "This child saved her mother." He did not know yet how literally true that sentence would become. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Today, Aaliyah Thompson is 18 years old. She is a freshman at Jackson State University on a full academic scholarship. Her mother, Renee Thompson, is alive. Renee is 41. She works part-time at a church daycare in Jackson and volunteers 2 afternoons a week at the Aaliyah's Promise Foundation, a nonprofit that has funded chemotherapy costs for over 900 uninsured women in the state of Mississippi. Renee's hair grew back. It is shorter now than it used to be, tighter to her head, and silver at the temples in a way it was not before. But it is there. On the mantel of their apartment, a 2-bedroom on Maple Street, larger than the one they had before, there is a framed photograph of Aaliyah at 15. Standing at a podium on a television stage, her hands pressed flat, her braids falling past her shoulders, the number 199 glowing on the board behind her. Next to the photograph there is a comb, a wide-tooth comb with a lavender handle, the kind mothers use to section hair before braiding. Renee cannot look at the comb without crying. Aaliyah cannot look at it without smiling. The distance between those two reactions is the story. Every morning for 7 months before Aaliyah Thompson walked onto that stage, she woke at 5:15 a.m. in the dark of a 1-bedroom apartment on Percy Street in Jackson, Mississippi, and did the same 4 things in the same order. She checked her phone alarm, always set for 5:15, never snoozed. She walked to the bathroom and brushed her teeth. She walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water and carried it to her mother's bedside table and set it down quietly so the ice wouldn't clink. And then she stood in the doorway of her mother's room for 60 seconds and watched Renee breathe. In and out. In and out. She counted. Not because a doctor had told her to, because she was 15 years old and her mother had stage 3 breast cancer, and every morning Aaliyah needed to confirm that the night had not taken her. Then she walked back to the couch. She slept on the couch so Renee could have the bedroom, and she braided her own hair. She had learned from YouTube. Her mother used to braid it every morning before school, sitting Aaliyah between her knees on the edge of the bed, the wide-tooth comb with the lavender handle moving through her hair in long, slow strokes that Aaliyah could feel in her shoulders and her spine and the back of her skull, a rhythm so familiar it was indistinguishable from love. Renee stopped braiding in January 2020, 3 weeks after her second chemotherapy infusion, when her hands began trembling too badly to hold the comb. She did not tell Aaliyah she couldn't do it anymore. She said she thought Aaliyah was old enough to do it herself. She said it casually, over breakfast, like it was a milestone, a graduation, not a loss. Aaliyah said okay. She went to school that day with her hair unbrushed, and watched 3 YouTube tutorials during lunch period, and braided her own hair for the first time that evening in the bathroom mirror, her arms aching, the parts crooked, the braids uneven. She redid them 4 times. By the 5th attempt, they were straight. She walked out of the bathroom, and Renee looked at her from the bed and said, "Baby, those are beautiful." Aaliyah smiled. Renee smiled. Neither of them said what both of them knew, that the comb with the lavender handle was still on the bathroom counter, untouched, and would stay there. The taping was September 25th, 2020, a Friday at the Atlanta Metro Studios in College Park, Georgia. Renee Thompson was diagnosed with stage 3 invasive ductal carcinoma on November 8, 2019, at the age of 37, after finding a lump during a self-exam in the shower. She went to the Community Health Center on Capitol Street in Jackson. She did not have a primary care physician because she did not have insurance, and was referred for a mammogram, which confirmed a 3.8 centimeter mass in her left breast. A biopsy confirmed the malignancy. The oncologist at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, Dr. Karen Osai, outlined the treatment plan. A mastectomy followed by 16 cycles of chemotherapy over approximately 8 months. Renee did not have health insurance. She worked as a home daycare provider, caring for 4 children in her apartment, earning between $600 and $900 per month depending on enrollment. She was not employed by an organization that offered benefits. She applied for Medicaid. Mississippi had not expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, and Renee's income, variable, cash-based, inconsistently documented, fell into the coverage gap, too high for traditional Medicaid, too low for marketplace subsidies. Denied. She applied for the hospital's charity care program, approved for the mastectomy, which was performed on December 19, 2019. The surgery was covered. The chemotherapy was not. Charity care at UMLC covered surgical procedures, but classified outpatient chemotherapy as a separate benefit, requiring a different application with different income thresholds. Renee applied. Denied. Household income exceeds threshold for outpatient pharmaceutical assistance. Her income exceeded the threshold by $73 per month. $73. The cost of a single chemotherapy infusion, Taxol and carboplatin, the standard protocol for her cancer type and stage, was $6,400. She needed 16 infusions. Total, $102,400. Renee sat in the oncology waiting room and read the denial letter and folded it into quarters and put it in her purse and drove home and made macaroni and cheese for the daycare children and did not cry until 11:30 that night, in the bathroom, with the faucet running. Aaliyah heard the faucet. Aaliyah heard everything. She was 15 years old, and she had been listening to her mother's grief through walls and doors and running water for weeks, cataloging every muffled sound, the way an animal catalogs the sounds of a forest, the safe ones and the dangerous ones, and the faucet at 11:30 was the dangerous one. She did not go to the bathroom door. She lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling and listened and began planning. Renee received her first chemotherapy infusion through a patient assistance program administered by the drug manufacturer, a program that covered the cost of the drugs but not the infusion fees, the anti-nausea medications, the blood work, or the oncologist's charges. The infusion fees alone, $1,800 per session. Renee paid for the first 3 sessions using the money she had saved from the daycare. Her savings, $4,100, accumulated over 2 years of skipping meals and buying generic everything, were gone by the 3rd session. She told Aaliyah business was good. She told her sister Clarice in Memphis that the insurance was handling it. She told her neighbor Donna that she was feeling better. She told Dr. Osei she would figure it out. She lied to every person who loved her because she did not know how to say the sentence, "I have cancer and I cannot afford to treat it, and I am probably going to die because $73 per month made me too rich for help." She stopped attending chemotherapy after the 4th session. She told Dr. Osei she needed a break. She told Aaliyah the doctor said she was doing so well they were spacing out the treatments. Another lie. Aaliyah did not believe it. She had been watching her mother deteriorate. The weight loss, the nausea, the trembling hands, the hair falling out in the shower drain, the wigs Renee wore when the daycare parents came, the headscarf she wore when they didn't. Aaliyah found the denial letter in Renee's purse while looking for bus fare to school. She read it in the school bathroom during 2nd period. She read it 3 times. She put it back. She did not tell her mother she had found it. She went to the school library at lunch and used the computer to search how to get free chemotherapy in Mississippi and patient assistance programs for breast cancer, and how much does Family Feud pay. She found the application page for Family Feud. She filled it out at the library computer in 17 minutes. In the "Why do you want to be on Family Feud?" box, she typed, "My mom has breast cancer and can't afford chemo. I'm 15. I need to win so she can get her treatments. Please." She listed herself as the team captain. She recruited her Aunt Clarice, her cousin Darnell, her best friend Kayla, and her neighbor Donna. She did not tell Renee until the acceptance letter came, 4 weeks later, and even then she told her it was just for fun, just something to do, just a chance to be on TV. Renee said she was too tired. Aaliyah said please. She said it once. Renee looked at her daughter and saw something in her face, the same thing Steve Harvey would see 7 weeks later, and said okay. One evening, 3 weeks before the taping, Miles was sitting at the kitchen table drawing while Renee napped on the bed. He was drawing a picture of his family, stick figures, the way 7-year-olds draw them, with big round heads and stick arms and triangle dresses. He drew Renee with a yellow triangle dress and no hair. Aaliyah was helping him with his crayons. He looked up at her and said, "Why does Mama wear a hat now? She used to have pretty hair." Aaliyah's hand stopped on the crayon box. She said, "Mama's hair is just resting, Miles, like how flowers go away in winter and come back in spring." Miles nodded and went back to drawing. He drew a yellow flower on Renee's stick figure head. Aaliyah stood up and walked to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub and pressed her palms against her eyes and breathed until her chest stopped shaking. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. The Thompson family won the main game 284-231. Aaliyah was electric, fast, loud, confident, high-fiving Kayla after every answer, dancing when the music played, performing the role of a teenager, having the time of her life so convincingly that Steve said, "This girl has more energy than my whole crew." When Steve sent her to the Fast Money podium, Aaliyah placed both hands flat on the surface. Her fingers were steady. She answered all 5 questions in 13 seconds. Steve walked to the board. The numbers climbed: 38, 45, 31, 44. The total reached 158. 1 answer left. Steve said, "We need 42. The audience was screaming. Clarice was gripping Donna's arm. Kayla had both hands on top of her head. Renee, standing at the side of the stage in a headscarf and a green cardigan that hung loose on her thinned frame, had her hands clasped in front of her chest. 41. 199. 1 point. The buzzer sounded. The board flashed red. The studio fell completely silent. Aaliyah did not move. Her hands stayed flat on the podium. Her eyes stayed on the board. Then she turned her head and looked at her mother standing at the edge of the stage, and her face, the face that had been performing confidence and joy for an hour, collapsed. Not dramatically. Quietly, the mask slid off, and what was underneath was a 15-year-old girl who was terrified that her mother was going to die and who had just lost the only plan she had. Steve started walking toward her with the card. He was 4 steps away when Aaliyah said it. "I'm playing for my mom's chemo, Mr. Steve." Steve stopped. The card hung at his side. The audience did not breathe. 300 people went still. Aaliyah said it again, quieter. "She has breast cancer." Stage 3. The insurance denied her. She stopped going to chemo because she can't pay for it. "She doesn't know I know. She doesn't know that's why I'm here." Renee, standing at the edge of the stage, heard every word. Her hand went to her mouth. Her knees buckled slightly, and Clarice caught her arm. She stared at her daughter, at the braids she had done herself, at the yellow blouse Renee had ironed that morning, with hands that could barely hold the iron, and the understanding of what Aaliyah had done, the scope of it, the secrecy of it, the weight of it, hit her all at once. Steve pressed the card against his chest. He turned away from the cameras. His shoulders shook. When he turned back, the tears were already falling. He said, "This child saved her mother." He said it to no one, and everyone. He walked to Aaliyah, and he stood in front of her, and he did not kneel. He looked at her the way you look at someone you recognize as an equal, and he said, "How long have you known?" 7 months, Aaliyah said. "I found the letter." "And you didn't tell her?" "No, sir, she didn't want me to know. So I did this." Steve Harvey closed his eyes. His jaw was working. Tears ran down both sides of his face. The studio fell completely silent for the 3rd time. A camera operator named Terrence set his rig on the floor. A sound engineer pressed her headphones against her ears and closed her eyes. Hardened crew members were not looking at the stage. They were looking at the floor, at the ceiling, at anything that wasn't a 15-year-old girl who had carried her mother's cancer in secret for 7 months and had walked onto a game show alone to try to fix it. Steve opened his eyes. He turned to his producer, Carla, who was standing behind monitor 2 with tears streaming down her face. He said, "Stop everything. We're stopping right now. This has never happened, I've said that before, but this time I mean it differently. A 15-year-old girl applied to this show by herself, recruited her own team, brought her dying mother here, and never told anyone the real reason. That is not something I can respond to with a card and a consolation line. Stop the game." Steve turned back to Aaliyah. He placed both hands on the podium, mirror images of hers, and he leaned forward and spoke quietly enough that the microphone barely caught it. But 300 people heard every syllable because the room was that silent. "Let me tell you something, Aaliyah. There was a night, a long time ago, when I sat down and wrote a goodbye letter to my family. I was done. I was finished. I was ready to mail it and be gone. And the only reason I'm standing here today is because I didn't mail it. I held on. Aaliyah, you're 15 years old and you've been holding on for 7 months without telling a soul. You braided your own hair because your mama's hands couldn't hold the comb. You found a denial letter in her purse and you didn't cry in front of her. You went to a school library and you figured out a plan. You are the strongest person I have ever met on this stage. not the strongest child, the strongest person. And today, I'm going to make sure your mama gets every treatment she needs. We're giving this family the $20,000. The audience erupted. Clarice screamed. Donna grabbed Kayla. Darnell pressed both fists against his forehead. Aaliyah's face crumbled, and she pressed her forehead against the podium, and her body shook. But Steve held up his hand. But Steve wasn't done. I made a phone call during our break today. I called Dr. Karen Osei at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I told her about Renee Thompson. I told her about the coverage gap. I told her about a 15-year-old girl who found a denial letter in her mother's purse and carried it inside herself for 7 months. Steve's voice broke. He cleared his throat. Dr. Osei and her team at UMLC have agreed to complete Renee's full chemotherapy protocol, all remaining 12 infusions, under the hospital's expanded charity care program. The infusion fees, the medications, the blood work, the follow-ups, all of it. Covered, Renee collapsed. Not a stumble. Her legs folded, and Clarice and Donna caught her, and they went to the floor together. 3 women holding each other on the stage. Aaliyah ran from the podium to her mother and threw her arms around her, and Renee held her daughter's face in both trembling hands and said, "You did this? You did this for me?" Aaliyah said, "I found the letter, Mama. I couldn't let you stop." Renee pressed her forehead against Aaliyah's forehead, and they stayed like that, foreheads touching, eyes closed, breathing the same air, and the image of those 2 faces pressed together would be screenshotted and shared 23 million times, and would become the defining photograph of the entire episode. The Sullivan family, the opposing team, led by Patricia Sullivan from Charlotte, crossed the stage. Patricia, who was a kindergarten teacher and who had watched the entire exchange from 10 feet away without moving, walked to Renee and knelt beside her, and took her hand and said, "I teach 5-year-olds every day. I've never seen a child teach a room full of adults what love looks like until right now." Her husband Ronald stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, tears running down his face. Their daughter Brittany knelt beside Aaliyah and held her hand. The 2 families stayed on the floor of that stage for over a minute. No one stood, no one spoke, no one moved. He wasn't finished. Steve pulled out his personal phone. He dialed on speaker. The studio was silent. The phone rang twice. A woman answered. "This is Dr. Osei," Steve said. "Dr. Osei, this is Steve Harvey again. I'm on speaker with Renee and Aaliyah Thompson. They just heard the news about the chemo coverage. But I need one more thing. Aaliyah Thompson is 15 years old. She is a straight-A student at Murrah High School in Jackson. She applied to this show from a school library computer to save her mother's life. I need to know, does UMLC have a scholarship program for students like this?" Dr. Osei was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mr. Harvey, I am going to personally recommend Aaliyah Thompson for the UMLS Chancellor's Scholarship. It's a full-ride, 4-year scholarship for Mississippi students who demonstrate extraordinary leadership and academic achievement. I don't think I've ever seen a more qualified candidate." Aaliyah looked at the phone. She looked at her mother. She said, "Mama, did she just say?" Renee nodded. She couldn't speak. She held Aaliyah's face and nodded and cried, and the stage manager, Ray, looked at the ceiling and pressed his headset against his ear and breathed. Steve turned to the camera. His eyes were swollen. His voice was raw. "I want to talk to everyone watching at home. This girl is 15. She found out her mother had cancer by reading a denial letter she found in a purse while looking for bus fare. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't ask for help. She went to a library and she applied to a game show. A 15-year-old girl applied to a game show to save her mother's life because the state of Mississippi has not expanded Medicaid, and a woman making $700 a month was $73 too rich for help. $73. If that number doesn't make you angry, I don't know what will. If you are watching this, and you have a daughter, look at her tonight and imagine her carrying what Aaliyah carried. And then call someone. Write a letter. Vote. Do something. Because no child should have to save her mother's life from a library computer. Steve turned to the Sullivan family. He told them their appearance fee would be tripled and $20,000 donated to the cause of their choice. Patricia Sullivan said, "Give it to cancer patients who fall in the gap. Give it in Aaliyah's name." Steve nodded. He shook Patricia's hand and held it. The clip reached 314 million views across all platforms within 11 days of airing. The hashtag Aaliyah saved her mom trended globally for 5 days. The video was shared by Michelle Obama, who wrote, "This is what courage looks like." It is 15 years old, and it braids its own hair. Bianca shared it without a caption, just the clip, which was reposted 4.7 million times. Within 72 hours, over 38,000 people contacted cancer assistance organizations. The governor of Mississippi was asked about the clip at a press conference and could not respond without pausing. 3 months after the taping, Renee Thompson completed her remaining 12 chemotherapy infusions at a Mosi. Dr. Osai and her team monitored every session. Aaliyah accompanied her to every appointment, sitting in the infusion room after school, doing homework in the plastic chair beside her mother. The same chair, the same routine, except now the water glass on the bedside table was accompanied by a textbook and a yellow highlighter. 6 months after the final infusion, Renee's scans came back clean. No detectable cancer. Dr. Osai called Renee and Aaliyah into her office and told them, and Aaliyah stood in the oncologist's office and pressed both hands flat on Dr. Osai's desk. The same gesture, the same flat palms, the same posture, and she said, "Thank you." Dr. Osai looked at Aaliyah's hands on the desk and understood that the gesture was involuntary, a muscle memory from a podium on a stage where a girl had pressed her hands flat and held the weight of her mother's life. A year after the taping, the Steve Harvey Foundation, in partnership with UMLC and the American Cancer Society, launched Aaliyah's Promise, a fund that covers chemotherapy costs for uninsured women in states that have not expanded Medicaid. To date, Aaliyah's Promise has funded treatment for 943 women in 12 states and raised $17.2 million. The fund also assigns a patient navigator to each recipient, a dedicated advocate who handles insurance appeals, financial assistance applications, and transportation. The coverage gap that denied Renee Thompson's claim by $73 has been closed for every woman the fund serves. 2 years after the taping, Aaliyah Thompson graduated from Murrah High School as valedictorian. She gave a commencement speech in which she did not mention Family Feud, did not mention Steve Harvey, did not mention the 199. She talked about her mother. She said, "My mom used to braid my hair every morning. She stopped because she couldn't hold the comb. She thought she was hiding something from me. She wasn't. I learned to braid my own hair, and I learned something else. That the people who protect you the most are the ones who need protection the most. If you love someone, don't wait for them to ask. Just look. The answer is always in their hands." The audience stood. Renee was in the third row. She was crying. Her hair had grown back, shorter, silver at the temples, but there. Aaliyah accepted the Chancellor's scholarship and enrolled at Jackson State University instead. She told a reporter from the Clarion Ledger, saved my mom. Jackson State is where I want to build the next version of me. She is studying pre-med. She wants to be an oncologist. Steve Harvey visited Aaliyah and Renee at their apartment on Maple Street, 18 months after the taping. He sat in the living room and Renee made him sweet tea, and Miles showed him a drawing, a new one, a family portrait in crayon with 4 figures. Renee's stick figure had hair now, yellow flowers on her head, the same ones Miles had drawn years ago. Steve asked to see the comb. Renee brought it from the mantel, the wide-toothed comb with the lavender handle. She held it and turned it in her hands. Steve said, "Can you hold it now?" Without shaking? Renee gripped the comb. Her hands were steady. She nodded. Steve said, in an interview with CBS that evening, "I've hosted this show for over 2 decades. I have met presidents and athletes and billionaires. The bravest person I have ever met is a 15-year-old girl who sat in a school library and typed a paragraph into a game show application to save her mother's life. She didn't call a congressman. She didn't start a GoFundMe. She went on Family Feud. Because she was 15, and that's what she could reach. And she reached it with both hands flat on the podium. And she didn't let go. Today, Renee Thompson is 41. Her scans remain clean. Her hair is back. She braids it herself now, a practical style, low maintenance. But on Sunday mornings before church, she sits on the edge of the bed, and Aaliyah sits between her knees on the floor, and Renee braids her daughter's hair. The comb moves through it in long, slow strokes. Neither of them speaks. The rhythm is enough. The wide-toothed comb with the lavender handle is no longer on the mantel. It is in the bathroom, in the cup beside the sink, where it belongs, not a relic, not a memorial, not a symbol. A comb. A working comb. Used every Sunday by a mother whose hands are steady again, on the hair of a daughter who once learned to braid her own because the world demanded it, and who lets her mother braid it now because the world no longer does, and because some mornings the most powerful thing you can do is sit still and let someone love you the way they used to. A girl braided her own hair because her mother's hands couldn't hold the comb, and then she walked into a library and typed a paragraph that saved a life. Sometimes the distance between dying and living is not a hospital or a treatment plan. It is a child in a plastic chair with a yellow highlighter, watching her mother breathe, doing the math the world refused to do. And sometimes the bravest thing in the world is not a soldier or a surgeon or a man on a stage. It is a 15-year-old girl with her hands flat on a podium and a secret in her chest, and a plan she made alone in a school library because no one else was going to make it for her. If this incredible story of sacrifice and love moved your heart, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the people who fight the hardest are sometimes the ones no one thought to ask. Have you ever watched someone carry a burden no one knew about? Let us know in the comments. And ring that notification bell for more stories that remind us what family truly means.